How might some critics respond to my objections to positivism, evidentialism, misology, which is the hatred of logic, deconstructionism, and the rest? Once or twice in my life I've heard the allegation that the arguments in this section are oversimplified. There are two possible ways to respond to this charge of oversimplification. One, I could frolic in deconstructionism and interpret the criticisms as endorsements of my position. And why not? Since all meaning is subjective, what prevents me from interpreting them any way I please? And second, or I could assume the critic means that each of my arguments represents the position being criticized as a universal claim, a statement that allows no exceptions. The critic may believe that the apparent defeat of such positions as positivism, evidentialism, and deconstructionism is a cheap victory won unfairly by oversimplifying the positions being criticized. While it is true that I present the positions as universal claims, it is not true that I'm guilty of misrepresenting or oversimplifying the theories. Consider the following pairs of propositions. 1a. All propositions not verified by scientific method are false. 1b. Some propositions not verified by scientific method are false. 2a. All statements that are neither analytic nor synthetic are meaningless. 2b. Some statements that are neither analytic nor synthetic are meaningless. 3a. All acts of believing propositions not supported by sufficient evidence are immoral. 3b. Some acts of believing propositions unsupported by sufficient evidence are immoral. 4a. All texts are meaningless. And 4b. Some texts are meaningless. I can only assume that the critic wants everyone to believe that the B proposition represents more fairly the views of the positivists, evidentialists, and the deconstructionists. And since the B proposition are obviously true, any attempt to reject propositions stated in the B or qualified versions is unfair and simplistic. The attempt to defeat my arguments in this way fails for two reasons. First, even though the B proposition are true, they are trivial in the sense that no informed person doubts them. It is difficult to interpret some texts, but the ambiguity of 2 or 2,000 texts has nothing to do with this deconstructionism. If all deconstructionists want to limit their position to proposition 4b, no one will object. But neither would anyone care. It would be like someone saying that during a 162-game season, every Major League Baseball team is going to lose at least one game, to which one appropriate response is, so what? Any attempt to defend evidentialism, positivism, and the other self-defeating positions by watering them down in the way I have indicated has a strongly negative effect of trivializing those positions. My second reply is that proponents of these views do assert the universal claim. I have no problem admitting there are lots of texts in libraries around the world that are difficult to interpret, but believing that some texts are difficult to interpret does not make me a deconstructionist. Consider someone who introduces himself as a skeptic and then defines his position by saying that some propositions are not true, as opposed to saying no propositions are true. As far as skepticism is concerned, this person is a fraud. And so the critic who charges me of oversimplification either is not thinking clearly or is playing a game. I formulated these positions in the way their proponents advance them, and in the only significant, that is non-trivial, form they can have. The charge of oversimplification is canard. There is no oversimplification, and the positions that have been critiqued truly are self-referentially absurd. Therefore, in concluding, the law of non-contradiction cannot be ignored, avoided, or dismissed as mere convention. It is a true universal and necessary principle of human thinking, acting, and communicating. It is also the principle that functions in the mind of God. It is nonsense to suggest that God operates according to a different or higher logic than the law of non-contradiction. If God does not or might not recognize the difference between B and non-B, there is no difference between good and evil. There is no difference between God and the devil. Such is the nonsense to which pious irrationalism would drive us. For all of its importance, however, logical consistency can never be the only criterion by which we evaluate worldviews. While the presence of a contradiction will alert us to the presence of error, the absence of contradiction does not guarantee the presence of truth. For that, we need other criteria.